So for a very succinct background to the talk, I'm going to state a bunch of things unqualifiedly about money at different points in the conversation. These are created things, these are not discovered things. So the things I'll be stating are myths or fragments of poetry that are invented. These are not truths about money, these are forms with which we can interact with money. Disclaimer number one. Number two is some of my own background to get here having this strange conversation involved some, the best way to bottom line this, alternations between incredibly emotionally harrowing roller coasters and sort of like soul annihilating, negatively synchronistic experiences with money and income at different times. Like, getting evicted from apartments and all bank accounts getting shut down and PayPal not working anymore and various experiences like that, to truly astonishing synchronistic. And when I say two, I do not mean linearly. I mean a back and forth between these two experiences for years and years and years, to like really astonishing, sort of impossible, positively synchronistic magical events connected to money, like people just texting me and saying, would you like $30,000? I'd just like to give it to you for no reason. So between those two things, getting kind of like whiplash back and forth between them happening, I got interested in this phenomenon because it felt like I was being abused by it. and so I dove into lots and lots of different kind of schools of thought connected to money, some of the more traditional, say law of attraction-based world, some of the very technical, the history of money, different mythologies around money, what's happening in the crypto world currently. And I was mostly dissatisfied with all of them, just on the level that they were incomplete. That money is a complex system connected to complex human beings. If it doesn't somehow include the emotional, the practical, the magical, the tangible, and the mythical, as well as the logical, the picture isn't true. So I'm going to do my best to kind of introduce some of the ideas and frameworks and mythologies that I've found really useful for this kind of engagement with this insane thing we call money, and have some experiences around that, and hopefully some time for discussion. Any questions about that? Okay. All right.
You're not a slow or quick at answering questions.
So we'll start off with everyone closing their eyes. Take a moment simply to feel your body and remember that that exists. Now, with your eyes still closed, I'm going to guide you through an experience that you might not have. Don't worry if nothing happens while I'm talking. So directly in front of you, in the darkness, let yourself see the spirit of money, however she appears. You don't have to force a visual if that doesn't appear. You can just let yourself sense a kind of energy or feeling, if that's all that comes. And with your eyes still closed, still seeing or feeling the spirit of money in front of you, I'm going to ask two questions and just notice what arises in response to each. Right now, what do you want from her?
Evil.
Eyes still closed. And next, what does she want you to learn in this next hour? You can open your eyes. We're not going to go around the whole circle, but just popcorn style. If anyone feels compelled to share an experience that they just had during that brief meditation, go ahead and pop a hand up. Anyone have an experience they'd like to share? Yeah.
I think the request was to look at her accurately and see her for what she is in this session.
Beautiful.
I just had a sense that money contained every good and evil thing people were willing to do for any motivation.
Resonate? Yes.
The spirit of money for me looked like Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah.
Like very surprised. Like, wait, what?
You know what's really funny is that's not the first time I've heard that.
Oh, wow.
My experience with that was very similar to the Tantra workshop last night about like cultivating genuine intimacy apart from needing to fuck.
Beautiful. Yeah, Mark.
Spirit of money to me. Pac-Man ghosts. It looked like that, and I didn't know why that popped into my mind's eye at first. And thinking about it, it's like I'm running away from it, and then every now and then I eat one of those magical white dots, and I turn around and I chase it profoundly, and then I run away from it again. I feel a little embarrassed.
It's disturbingly accurate.
She appeared to me as a ghostly, sweet mother that was also seductive and alluring, and said, and the question was like, I want to trust you, and she said, you could trust me, and I might kill you.
I was really distracted that we gendered the spirit of money.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Wasn't quite expecting this, but asking, like, so what do you want me to learn from you? She said, stop pretending that she's the one that has the power. That it's in you.
Any other burning shares? Yes.
When it first appeared to me, the more I tried to make it out, the harder it was for me to see what it actually was.
Yeah.
It turns out that money is a trickster spirit.
Yes. I thought about including that as a yes.
I saw a kind of a female form wailing with thousands of hands pulling, and that it was multi-layered and kind of multi-dimensional almost, and that in the middle was this, it looked kind of like an egg, just this absolutely neutral force.
An egg.
Yeah, something like that.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to put forth a few different strange statements about the spirit of money. We'll see what those bring up, and we'll talk about them a little more. The first is that money is a banished spirit. Meaning that money once was a kind of divine entity that did not exist in this plane of reality, did not exist in the material world, and committed a certain crime amongst the divine beings, amongst the gods and goddesses. And for that crime, she was banished and punished to inhabit this world in the form of cash and digits, and we can in some ways intuit her nature as a banished spirit for a variety of reasons, just like we can intuit her sort of fundamentally eternal or spiritual nature in the fact that things like gold, some of the most eternal substances that we know of on this plane, tend to cluster around her, that a certain level of permanence seems to gravitate towards her essence. And we can also smell her yearning to return to the land of the spirit, the non-material, with the movement that she's been gradually making away from gold and even cash into the digital and the ephemeral realm. So we're not going to talk about that right now. What we're going to talk about instead is why she was banished. So I'm curious, just within this sort of mythic bubble that we've created in the space, knowing absolutely nothing about what any of this means, right? Does anyone have a felt sense of, just to check, does this mean I want to speak soon? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I want to check to see, after checking in with the two people who've done this, if anyone has a felt sense of why she might have been banished to this realm that we inhabit. Before that, right?
Just speaking to that.
Same.
Okay, good. So, does anyone have a mythopoetical inspiration for why she might have been banished? What her crime might have been? Yeah.
As I heard that, I reflected my own experience of life and death and what the process is. And the process of coming to life is to experience all the sensation and emotion and everything that's present here, the joy, the high, as well as the pain and sorrow, the death. And there was I imagine some crime in that, in the eternal, of, to me, is star energy, star frequency, the collapse or the Big Bang into a light or darkness. That's eternal. And in that crime of eternity, there was a banishment to go and feel, or go and be eternal, somewhere with many polarities and directions.
Beautiful. Anyone else feel compelled by an intuition? Yeah.
So I'm imagining her being so coveted and so incredibly misunderstood for the power that people who coveted her believed they would possess if they possessed her, that she banished herself because of the darkness that was being created around and because and through her.
Beautiful. Yes.
Imagining her as like a mother who might have like abandoned her children like in the wilderness to die, and then being sent here to learn the impact of that by having all of us, like billions of children, all sort of being needy of her and wanting her support.
Yeah. Tom.
I'm struck with there's a phrase in physics, nature abhors an exponential. But money actually is exponential. It's like the only other thing that tries to be exponential, that actually really tries, is cancer. Wow. So I don't have a full mythical answer to that question, but I'm really struck by the fact that cancer and money are the places that we see that phenomenon.
I have a question that's almost previous to this one,
Yeah.
which is banished implies cursed.
Uh-huh.
And do you mean that, or is it more along the lines of what Tracy said, where she almost like banished herself?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. Can I have your thoughts on it?
Anyone? I will share a number of thoughts on this, but yeah. Yes.
She was just getting too powerful.
Just getting too powerful. Yeah. I identify with that.
Yeah, I imagine that she was too powerful and captivating, alluring. So a wounded little boy wearing a man outfit banished her to feel a lot more comfortable and safe in his own skin.
Wow. Yeah. I'm curious. I want to check in here. Does anyone in this space identify with the feeling of somehow being from another very beautiful non-material realm that you've been somehow cast out of in any way? Not any, maybe not cast out of, but that you were in once, right? And now all of a sudden things are not that. Okay, good. Yeah, for those, not everyone has this experience, but for those of you who do, that's one potential starting point for developing a kind of empathic relationship, I think, with the spirit of money. Able to identify with the conscious entity of money as someone who has that sort of taste of not quite being from here, but somehow having found themselves here.
I have that. It's just the polarity of, like, all my psychedelic experiences are being from somewhere incredibly dark and grim.
Yeah.
This is vacation.
This is a kind of vacation. Okay. Good. So I really loved hearing the different potential causes of money's banishment. And it feels in all of those like there's a thread of poetic truth I think would be amazing to explore after the session in ongoing inquiry or conversation or writing or meditation with the spirit of money to find out what sort of story she wants to tell you. And I'm going to share a little bit of some of the story that I received from her in my own relationship connected to her banishment. So my view of money's banishment is that she was banished by the gods for giving human beings a certain gift. Similar to Prometheus, but a little bit different. And the gift that she gave us that had her suddenly crystallize into material form, initially of clay tablets with inscriptions of debt and cowrie shells, and then gradually pieces of stamped coin into the forms that she's taken today. The gift that she gave sounds very strange initially, but I think ultimately has a seed of truth in it. And the gift was escape from death. Now, the term that we use today to describe this phenomenon is the steadily increasing efficiency of business or capitalism. But the heart of efficiency is a movement away from the constraints of a finite lifespan. It's a movement away from what it means to be a human being who can do one thing or another thing, and then you die. And there's something about money, something about the spirit of money, that wanted to give us a kind of escape from that permanent confine, that deep constraint and imprisonment to mortality that is not allowed on this plane. Is very much against the plans of the gods. And for starting to give that gift, she was banished to be here in this realm among us, since she apparently loved us so much.
Does this have a specific form? Like, I'm wondering if you're talking about agriculture or if you're talking about a concept that enters people's minds, or like what form?
Yeah, I will flesh out a little bit more of the kind of historical context, and then I would love to just dive into some practices and an illumination of a couple of the types of medicine that I think the spirit of money is available to give us on a daily basis. So first, I would like to pause. We have one piece of inquiry connected to the form that banishment took, or the form that she took before she existed here. Are there any initial reflections or burning inquiries connected to anything we've talked about so far? Yes.
So you're talking about like the fountain of youth, like you could live forever.
Something like that, yeah.
Why is she a woman?
Good, talk about that. And she's not,
Is the banishment a curse or like some kind of fault, or is it actually part of the plan, or is it her plan? Like that's my mind guess.
Curse, gender. Anything else? Yes.
How does it remind the usefulness of talking about money in this way?
Good. Okay. So, curse, gender, usefulness of the mythical elements, and all that. Great. Why don't we start with gender? So, I don't think that money is a woman, and I've chosen to use her instead of it, simply because of the kind of poetical impact of her, not because of it. I don't think that it's a gendered being. And I'm sorry if using that pronoun has a negative impact. In terms of whether it's a curse, I think some of the lessons that money has to give, some of the kind of medicinal nature is connected to the question of volition and power and choice. And there's something about the nature of money that pulls us into a deep interaction with those questions, the questions of our own agency and power in the world. And there's a kind of experience for human beings of a sort of ultimate power, an ultimate creatorship that's described in certain kind of medicinal or spiritual experiences. And then there's something that's a sort of opposing pole that's often described of a kind of powerlessness, a kind of surrendering into non-agency, a kind of dissolution of any effort or flow and simply being lived. And somewhere either in the union or between those two different poles of experiences, there's a gift from money. I mean, the daily experience of interacting with the spirit of money that we're pulled into are ultimately partly attempting to pull us into a visceral, embodied recognition of both of those. Curse, gender, there's one I missed.
Correlation with one
Usefulness. Okay, good.
There was also another one.
Say it again?
Was there a fourth or no?
Yeah, I think there was the form.
There was a fourth.
Form.
Okay. In terms of usefulness, this is an experimental process. This isn't something I spent a while diving into this and writing about this kind of work and then facilitating kind of plant medicine ceremonies, except with money instead of plants. And I eventually got to a point where I handed that off to other people to do. So I don't usually talk about this stuff anymore. This is no longer my central focus. I don't think it makes sense to start a movement or a large church around this.
It's a church of money.
Yeah, well, we sort of have that. Initially, I had the idea that since we all sort of worship money on some level, it would be nice to make that conscious.
Yeah.
It would be nice to create a sort of conscious mythology around it so we can be in right relationship to it on that level.
Yeah.
Actually, I no longer think that. Where I'm speaking from it today in terms of the usefulness that I see is to be in true relationship with money means to have all parts of ourself engaged with her. And some of the parts that I see most often neglected in relationship to money are the interpersonal and the mythical. So we'll be leaning in that direction for this conversation for those reasons.
I have a burning comment.
Yeah.
When you said escape from death, the phrase that hit me was escape from entropy. Because living things die, but actually all physical systems have entropy. So is that?
That seems like a very potent inquiry. Yeah, I love that one.
Resonates with the thing about cancer. Cancer cells are immortal except that they kill the host.
Parasite.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so yes.
Oh, just thoughts on usefulness.
Usefulness.
One quote that I love is that the world isn't made out of atoms, but that it's made out of stories. Kind of like the tangible world may be made out of atoms, but the world that we as human beings are interacting with is a thing of stories. And we are evolutionarily adapted to living in the mythic. Almost more than we are adapted to live in ultimate reality or in even physical reality. Such that putting it in a mythic frame speaks almost to us on an atomic level.
That resonates very deeply. Okay. 220? Okay. So. Okay, so since we only have a limited amount of time, money exists, and we will also we'll have to shrink the conversation from what it could be. I would love to dive into money's parentage and the kind of mythical genealogy as the child of a certain kind of non-consensual incest between Zeus and Aphrodite in certain traditions, and we're not going to be able to talk about that. So hopefully, if anyone's really interested in this, we can connect on the Facebook group afterwards and I can send some writings on that. What I would love to talk about is bringing a kind of practical element to what we're talking about. Some of the different methods for deepening a relationship with money in this sort of context in order to open up conscious receptivity to any lessons as a medicinal teacher that she might have to give us. And so I'd love to share an experiment with some practices connected to that, or at least one more practice connected to that. We've already done one. And then two, I'd love to highlight a few of the different areas that I know she tends to pull people into, I think, for a certain kind of painful, kinky awakening. So, I'll start off with these three things. Could say the way in which I believe money is in fact a cursed spirit, not just a banished spirit, is that she has an enormous amount of darkness built into her current nature. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's actually in many ways the source of her power as a medicinal teacher, because it's impossible to work directly with money without being pulled into a confrontation with that darkness and the permanence of that darkness in some way. A couple of the flavors of that darkness I've put up here, and we'll go through them quickly. The first is consumption. Now, each of these is a kind of shadow of money. Each of these is a kind of shadow of existence that most of us try to run away from the inescapability of throughout our lives. So there's something about this plane of existence that money's been banished to. that we live on that is consumptive. Just as a heads up, diving into these topics, especially without kind of lots and lots of warm-up time, the energy is likely to get static and possibly confrontational and triggering. So I'll ask that everyone do your best to stay in your body and slow down and notice the intense sensation of any kind of mental or physical sparks that start to erupt off of this discussion specifically. So the consumption that is built into money is a kind of reflection of the consumptive nature of life itself, the way in which life consumes other life inescapably. That all of us are here right now because we've eaten plants or animals. And eating just plants is not actually an escape from the consumptive nature of things. I'd actually love if you're willing to share a little bit about the kind of spirit and perceptual characters of plants to bring light to that fact. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. From my own direct experience with plants, I relate with them very differently than animals, in that there seems to be in the plant spirit world almost a sense of removal from the immediate. Animals have this, we included, this deeply immediate sense of threat to existence, whereas plants seem to have a lot more flexibility in that. My experience with plants is that they still experience grief, especially if there's a kind of a disrespect. The motivation, intention, the care of our actions is the thing that resounds most loudly through the interdimensional space that plants seem to inhabit.
Thank you. Okay. So, in order to live, we're consuming other life all of the time, like living conscious life in some form, plant or animal form. And that's a sort of fundamentally tragic fact in a certain way. It's maybe a very beautiful fact as well, if we can bring a level of reverence to it, but there's a grief in that. There's a grief about the fact that in some way something has to, like the snake or the mouse has to live. That's tragic. That fundamental trade-off and duality that exists. And the grief of that, the full awareness of, openness to, and allowing of that grief and that reality and the ultimate beauty of that grief without a diminishment of it is, I believe, one of the aspects of human finite existence that money desperately wants to pull us into an awareness of. The way that we experience it on a day-to-day basis with money is the level on which every dollar is a kind of store of finite lifespan. That's where money gets its value from the finite store of our own life force. And so when we take money from other people, we are consuming them. We are cannibalizing those human beings' life force. That's not a bad thing. It can be an equal exchange. There can be great value added, there can be great efficiency added. Some total life can happen. And at the same time, you are taking a bite out of them. There's a pound of flesh being cut away. Now, a lot of deeply empathic people, especially people in service-oriented traditions, can intuit this fact, to have a lot of reticence to accepting money from other people, to taking money, because they can feel the consumptive quality. Saying, I would like to take, I want to help you and heal you and bring you life, and somehow also at the same time, take a bite out of your body. I would like to consume your flesh and blood at the same time. There's a felt dissonance between those two things that's unavoidable for human beings. We are all constantly consuming each other at the same time. We can do that volitionally or not. We can do it with awareness of the beauty and the tragedy of it, the love that's at the heart of it, or not. This is one of the facts that's built into the nature of money and is simmering right beneath the surface that most of us are very reluctant to look at. We're just going to continue to pull us into an interaction with that over and over and over until we do.
I would like to request a moment of breath from the group for coherence.
Maybe one more. these don't have to be questions, but there are any initial reactions, responses, experience anyone would like to share?
I don't know how to share this, but it's like the archetype of the vampire, which is like so in our mythology and so in our stories. I can't help but have that come to mind, and I've had experiences of that in myself and been disgusted by it and like, attempted to integrate it in some ways.
Yeah. Val?
This discussion very strongly resonates with, it's like, which pantheon is money coming from? There's something that I sometimes tongue-in-cheek refer to as God's in need of math. Like the example that pops to mind is Moloch, but that's not going to help. Evolution is actually an example. There's something sort of eldritch and Lovecraftian about parts of that pantheon. So like the way that they're talking about it being fundamentally consumptive is like bringing in an aspect of, it's not quite a hell, it's more like a transcendental strangeness that is alien to human value, because human value isn't coming from that pantheon. It's just a world where that light can reflect on, which isn't to say that it's evil either, but it's very strange. It strongly resonates with this strangeness.
That's very beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
So, just bring it right back down to the ground. I at one point in my life poured everything into a business. The business corporate ripped me off for $500,000 and left me on the street. And from that, I learned to look at human beings from the standpoint of beings which would not give me a dime if I needed some food. Right, so I began to look at it from that perspective. Even people who I was friends with, I had to mentally create boundaries of my own expectations so I could structure my efforts to be able to survive in this world. But I very much felt the teeth as my family and my life was eaten in ways that pretty, like the hair doesn't come back.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really resonate with the empathic sense of taking a bite out of someone. And it's really interesting in my relationship to corporations, because corporation structure feels like something that's been designed to be this entity of infinite lifespan. And so like taking a bite out of it feels like really okay, even though my working there feels really not okay.
Yeah.
But then like doing the work that actually feels really okay for me, and like working with people one-on-one does have that feeling of, oh, I'm like devouring a little of your life force, even as I'm doing this thing that gives me life.
Yeah. Yeah, I've experienced the sort of comfort. Anyone else feel sort of comfort taking money from corporations versus people? It's really interesting we all feel this, because corporations are groups of people. You're taking money away that could be given to someone else, that is technically belongs to someone else at that point. But this sort of distance or abstraction that a corporation allows for this sort of ease with consumption that's very similar to the kind of ease that happens from not having to hunt and kill your own animals. Yeah.
So the minute you wrote those up and said these are characteristics of her, my immediate thought was, is it our projection upon her? And is she not either misunderstood, completely neutral, or akin to Kali energy, which appears to be so disgusting, and yet with a greater understanding of Kali, she is both the destroyer and the creator, and truly from a place of love.
Yeah, I would say any discomfort that we have with any of these, money is, if we're in deliberate relationship with money, she is going to gradually burn these away.
Okay.
That these are fundamental aspects of human existence that are inescapable on some level, and they can totally coexist with absolutely selfless giving and non-zero sum games, with total freedom and empowerment, and with absolute truth, but they're existing alongside them. And as long as we run from them, money is going to keep pulling us back.
What it brings up for me is this idea of being in integrity with the value that I deliver. Because if I really think about it as like taking a chunk out of someone, it's like, is the piece that I'm going to put back in, like, is it actually going to add to them more than it's taking away?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a necessary, it's a necessary part. the affinity between a sense of fairness or equity and money is very deep. This is one of the reasons why I think Zeus, as kind of arbiter of law and exchange, is one of her parents. Yeah.
So I think for the first time, when you're talking about the consumption of animals, and then relating that to money, I understood the erotic nature of it.
Yeah.
Like that. I think my relationship to eating animals is one of like regard and respect, and like being able to emotionally look that animal in the eye and say, I am consuming you. And that's the sort of respect posture I want to have towards eating animals. And it just, I realized the word erotic fits.
Yeah, I think so. I'm curious, has anyone had an experience at any point in an erotic context of feeling like you're being devoured by your partner in a really nice way?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, so this doesn't have to be a bad thing in any way. It's gonna be a really amazing thing.
Just in response to replacing a bite with something, when that $500,000 was taken from me and I was sent out, I was also given the opportunity to go through a really difficult internship I would have never chosen of my own volition. I had a wonderful job in the SEAL team. I did not need this in my mind, but I got the opportunity because this bite was taken out and it turned into this. So I have to say that I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah.
And that was part of the journey.
Thank you. We have to pause there for the sake of time on this topic. This is very rich terrain. We could dive infinitely deep into this. We're not going to be able to dive into both of these very deeply, so I just want to put little flags for everyone's ongoing inquiry and conversation. The level of enslavement is that an apparent part of this material world involves power over in some fundamental way. Not a kind of natural or permanent power over, but the fact that certain things can be impacted by other things. I have power over the location of this pen, and to the extent that we inhabit this material world together, we have power over each other. We can cause an impact to other people. We can kill them, we can threaten them, we can help them, we can massage them. All of those are forms of power over. Now, the institution of slavery still exists. It's the most profitable illicit trade in the world right now, human trafficking, that I know of, which means in some way we know that it's the most intense shadow of the current financial system. So there's something hiding beneath the surface of all business, of all trade, that is a kind of power over or enslavement that we don't have to face on a day-to-day basis most of the time because of where we are and the sort of privilege that we have. But like if anyone had berries today at lunch, those were picked by wage slaves, most likely. This is most of the technology that we have is in a similar route. So even outside of the realm of human trafficking, specifically, even outside of the fact that all of the money that you ever spend is at some point going to get funneled through the purchase of human beings. All of it. You're going to contribute to that in some way, indirect or direct. That's hiding beneath the surface of capitalism, but capitalism isn't an escape from that fact. Now, bringing conscious, loving, caring to both our position of being enslaved by others, which we are if we have anyone who pays us, we're being conditionally enslaved, and to deliberately, consciously, caringly, temporarily enslaving people when we pay for any service or product, right? That's very possible. That's very, very needed. But that deep, man, can you feel the energy in the room on this conversation? This is probably the most highly charged thing. Think of the fundamental human value of freedom goes so deep that this aspect of existence itself, the reality of the fact that we own animals, and that's seen as somehow okay, that we temporarily own each other in quasi-volitional wage relationships, right? That fact, our souls are always going to be running away from that, so we're desperate not to participate in it. When I said kinky ayahuasca, this is one of the things I meant most, is that we are all in BDSM relationships with each other with the world, with other human beings, with animals, all of the time. They can be consensual, they can be negotiated. Hopefully every contract is a consensual, negotiated BDSM relationship. But we are practicing BDSM. All of us. That's what the financial system is. We can do it consciously or not.
I wonder if sex work is the second most profitable.
Well, out of the most common type of human trafficking is sex slavery.
Yeah.
It's the most profitable. And I want to bring everyone through a big practice together to start bringing some of these into your life, so you can learn to, so if you like, you can begin relating to money as a sort of teacher, as an initiator into these elements of human existence. I think she's a very powerful facilitator in. Before I do, the last thing I want to say is on this. Definitions of money. Actual definitions. Anyone have one?
Store of value.
Store of value. Anything else? Yeah, some sort of so kind of store on one hand. One of the other most common definitions is a kind of representation of value. You've heard this?
Or representation of scarcity.
Representation of value or scarcity. Good.
Numerical representation of empathy.
Yeah, that as well. I'm going to dive into this one because this is the aspect of money I think is. This is the charge that exists around this is very different than the charge around this. Generally, if you start thinking about this, you'll just start checking out. I mean, I don't know what's being talked about. This is the sort of so just trying to stay in your body and just sort of absorb it. Yeah. So a representation broadly is an image. It's an incomplete surface image of something that stands for it. Now, when we have something that is an incomplete representation of something else, there's another word we usually use. And that word is lie. Truth has two different dimensions. It has completeness and it has precision. And to the extent that every sentence, every statement, and everything we see is incomplete, it's not fully true. Money as a representation of value is a lie about value and scarcity. It's an incomplete image. It's an image of value and scarcity. There's something else, which is an image of value and scarcity, that is a lie about value and scarcity, which is all of perceptual existence. Everything we're seeing and experiencing right now is a kind of holographic image, an incomplete image of the fundamental nature of beauty and scarcity, of lack or longing and goodness that's at the heart of existence. So all of perceptual experience is money. In terms of the kind of most psychedelic aspects of experience that money can pull us into, this thread I think is the most worth exploring. You can start tripping balls if you work with money and go into the deception route. Okay. I know that there are likely some burning shares or questions, and there's going to be a 10-minute break after this, so I'll stick around to field some of those. Anyone can stay if they want to, so we can share as a group. But before that happens, everyone close your eyes. Feeling your body again, remembering that that exists. And remembering that at any point going forward, just like we began this session, you can visit the spirit of money, however money wants to appear to you. You can converse, you can ask questions, you can ask how much money you're meant to receive next, you can ask what's needed from you in order for that to happen. You can deepen that relationship like you would a relationship with anyone over time from this point forward. And in this moment with your eyes closed, see if you can allow yourself to objectify money. To think about whatever is currently frustrating about your current financial circumstances. Anything that you feel either temporarily or permanently powerless about. any way that you feel that what you want is being withheld from you in some way. And let yourself fully drop into, not avoiding any of the intensity or the yearning or the frustration that's at the heart of this feeling. Scarcity, constraint, whatever it is. And now you're going to let yourself feel the way in which the spirit of money is pinning you down in a beautiful, consensual BDSM scene that long ago you agreed to and completely forgot about. How money is teasing you, withholding the parts of herself that you're most craving, like a perfectly brilliant, infinitely sadistic, infinitely wise dominatrix teacher. And in this moment, not only can you let yourself fully, maybe for the first time, sink into relishing, absorbing, embracing the incredible, sensational yearning and the delight of constraint and powerlessness that you feel. You can also let yourself feel the way in which you, as a human soul, are being expanded and step by step taught and initiated into right relationship with this material existence through her sadistic teachings. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So we're going to do a round to officially close, and then stick around for about 7 minutes in case anyone has anything burning they'd like to discuss as a group. So succinctly, I'm leaving here with
arousal,
Enlightenment.
Validation. A new teacher and transformation.
Newfound consent.
Humble curiosity and devotion.
Rest.
Curiosity.
Teacher.
Permission. A different lens.
Visual, metaphorical information to inquire into.
Val.
Frightened gratitude.
incompletion.
The heart of an experience of the beauty and tragedy of life.
Love.
Surrender to enslavement.
Devotion.
Perspective.
No? Good. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You have a word?
Yeah, what you do?
Yeah.
Yeah, gratitude. Leaving here with gratitude.
Thank you.
Visiting an old
Thank you for pouring your vision into this and sharing this.
Thank you.
So we have the space for a little while. I'll stick around here if anyone wants to talk amongst themselves or with me. Obviously, you're welcome to.
In staff meeting, we have a staff meeting in the kitchen right now. Literally, right now.
I just want to say I'm deeply regret a much longer conversation.
I'm gonna leave my things right here, so I'm right back.
Into your subconscious.
Yeah.
You got two in the hot box?